It was easier. Miss Scalapino read to the class from a book with illustrations because I made up my own stories in Spanish based on the pictures. She held the book with her both hands above her head and walked around the classroom to make sure that everyone got a chance to see the pictures, none of which were animals. I enjoyed looking at them and making up stories, but I wished that I understood what she was reading. In time, I learned some of my classmates' names. The one I heard the most and therefore learned first was Carlos. Carlos was the biggest, strongest, and most popular kid in the class. Everyone wanted to be his friend and to play with him. He was always chosen captain when kids formed teams. Since I was the smallest kid in the class and did not know English, I was chosen last. I preferred to hang around Arthur, one of the boys who knew a little Spanish. During recess, he and I played on the swings, and I pretended to be a Mexican movie star, like Jorge Negrete or Pedro Infante, riding a horse and singing the corridos which we often heard on the car radio. I sang them to Amber as we swung back and forth, going as high as we could. But when I spoke to Arthur in Spanish and Mrs. Scalapino heard me, she said, "No!" with body and soul. Her head turned left and right 100 times a second, and her index finger moved from side to side, as fast as a windshield wiper on a rainy day. "English! English!" she repeated. Arthur avoided me whenever she was around. Often during recess, I stayed with the caterpillar. Sometimes it was hard to spot him because he blended in with the green leaves and twigs. Every day I brought him leaves from the pepper and cypress tree that grew on the playground. Just in front of the caterpillar, lying on top of the cabinet, was a picture book of caterpillars and butterflies. I went through it, page by page, studying all the pictures and running my fingers lightly over the caterpillars and bright wings of the butterflies and the many patterns on them. I knew the caterpillars turned into butterflies because Roberto had told me, but I wanted to know more. I was sure information was in the words written underneath each picture in big black letters. I tried to figure them out by looking at the pictures. I did this so many times that I could close my eyes and see the words, but I could not understand what they meant. My favorite time in school was when we did art, which was every afternoon and after the teacher had read to us. Since I did not understand Mrs. Scalapino, when she explained the art lessons, she let me do what I wanted. I drew all kinds of animals, but mostly birds and butterflies. I sketched them in pencil and then colored them using every color in my crayon box. Mrs. Scalapino even tacked one of my drawings up on the board for everyone to see. After a couple of weeks, it disappeared, and I did not know to ask where it had gone. One cold Thursday morning during recess, I was the only kid on the playground without a jacket. Mr. Sims must have noticed that I was shivering, because that afternoon after school, he took me to his office and pulled out a green jacket from a large cardboard box that was full of used clothes and toys. He handed it to me and gestured for me to try it on. It smelled like graham crackers. I put it on, but it was too big, so he rolled up the sleeves about 2 inches to make it fit. I took it home and showed it to my parents. They smiled. I liked it because it was green and it hid my suspenders. The next day, I was on the playground wearing my new jacket and waiting for the first bell to ring when I saw Carlos coming at me like an angry bull. Aiming his head directly at me and pulling his arms straight back with his hands clenched. He stomped up to me and started yelling. I did not understand him, but I knew I needed to do something with the jacket because he began to pull at it, trying to take it off of me. The next thing I knew, he and I were on the ground wrestling. Kids circled us, and I could hear them yelling Curtis's name and something else. I knew I had no choice. chance, but I stubbornly hang on to my jacket. He pulled on one of the sleeves so hard that it ripped at the shoulder. He pulled on the right pocket and it ripped. Then Mrs. Scalapino's face appeared from above. She pushed Curtis off of me and grabbed me by the back of the collar and picked me up off the ground. It took all the power I had not to cry. On the way to the classroom, Arthur told me that Curtis claimed that the jacket was his and that he had lost it at the beginning of the year. He also said that the teacher told Curtis and me that we were being punished. We had to sit on the bench during recess for the rest of the week. I did not see the jacket again. Curtis got it, but I never saw him wear it. For the rest of the day, I could not even pretend I was paying attention to Miss Scalapino. I was so embarrassed. I laid my head on top of my desk and closed my eyes. I kept thinking about what had happened that morning. I wanted to fall asleep and wake up and find out it was only a dream. The teacher called my name, but I did not answer. I heard her walk up to me. I did not know what to expect. She gently shook me by the shoulders. Again, I did not respond. Mrs. Scalapino must have thought I was asleep because she left me alone, even when it was time for recess and everyone else left the room. Once the door was quiet, I slowly opened my eyes. I had had them closed for so long a time that the sunlight coming through the windows blinded me. I rubbed my eyes with the back of my hands and then looked to my left at the jar. I looked for the caterpillar, but could not see it. Thinking it might be hidden, I put my hand in the jar and lightly stirred the leaves. To my surprise, the caterpillar had spun itself into a cocoon and attached itself to a small twig. It looked like a tiny cotton bulb, just like Roberta said it would. I gently stroked it with my index finger, picturing it asleep and graceful. At the end of the school day, Mrs. Scalapino gave me a note to take home to my parents. Papa and Mama did not know how to read, but they did not have to. As soon as they saw my swollen upper lip and the scratches on my left cheek, they knew what the note said. When I told them what had happened, they were very upset, but relieved that I did not disrespect the teacher. For the next several days, going to school and facing Mrs. Scalapino was harder than ever. However, I slowly began to get over what had happened that Friday. Once I tried to continue the routine at school, and I picked up some English words, I felt more comfortable in class. On Wednesday, May 23rd, a few days before the end of the school year, Mrs. Scalapino took me by surprise. After we were all sitting down and she had taken roll, she called for everyone's attention. I did not understand what she said, but I heard her say my name and held up a blue ribbon. She then picked up my picture of the butterfly that had disappeared weeks before and held it up for everyone to see. She walked up to me and handed me the drawing and the silk blue ribbon that had the number 1 printed on it in gold. I knew I had received first prize for my drawing. I was so proud I felt like bulging out of my skin. My classmates, including Curtis, stretched their necks to see the ribbon. That afternoon, during our free period, I went over to check on the caterpillar. I turned the jar around, trying to see the cocoon. It was beginning to crack open. I excitedly called out, "Look, look," pointing to it. The whole class, like a swarm of bees, rushed over to the counter. Miss Scalapino took the jar and placed it on the desk in the middle of the classroom, for everyone could see it. For the next several minutes, we all stood there, watching the butterfly emerge from its cocoon in slow motion. At the end of the day, just before the first bell, Mrs. Scalapino picked up the jar and took the class outside to the playground. She placed the jar on the ground, and we all circled around it. I had a hard time seeing over the other kids, so Mrs. Scalabino called for me and motioned for me to open the jar. I broke through the circle, knelt on the ground, and unscrewed the lip. Like magic, the butterfly flew into the air, fluttering its wings up and down. After school, I waited in line for my bus in front of the playground. I proudly carried the blue ribbon in my right hand and my drawing in the other. Arthur and Curtis came up and motioned and stood behind me to wait for their bus, but Curtis motioned for me to show him the drawing again. I held it up so he could see it. "He really likes it, Francisco," Arthur said to me in Spanish. "Como se dice es tuyo in inglés?" I asked. "It's yours," answered Arthur. "It's yours," I repeated, handing the drawing to Carlos.